So I think we're about to find out just what it is about Alan's poetry which has attracted such praise, such plaudits from so many sources, including Van Morrison. So I hope you'll all join me in welcoming to the stage Professor Alan Gillis.
Hello there. Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you very much all for coming out. It's cold all night and it's the end of a long semester, so it's usually it's a relief to see somebody came out, so thank you for being here. I'm going to start with the first poem of the first book, which is a long time ago now. The Ulster Way is a continuous sort of pathway set around the edges of Northern Ireland, more than 600 miles, and invented to get people outdoors and get out into the fresh air. It was a typical thing. If you're driving along a road, you'll see a sign for the Ulster Way, and it'll be pointing directly to, you know, a hedge or a ditch or off the edge of a cliff, and you kind of think, oh yeah. This is a poem about being scared of cows, and it's called The Ulster Way. This is not about burns or hedges. There will be no gorse. You will not notice the ceaseless photosynthesis or the dead trees' thousand fingers, the trunk's inhumanity writhing with texture, as you will not be passing into farmland, nor will you be set upon by cattle, ingle-buried, haunching and haunting with their eyes, their shocking opals, graving you, hoovering and scooping you, full of a whatness that sieves you through the abattoir hillscape. The runnels slabber through dark grass, sweating for the night that will purple to a love-bitten bruise. All this is in your head. If you walk, don't walk away in silence, under the stars' ice fires of violence, to the water's darkened strand. For this is not about horizons or their curving limitations. This is not about the rhythm of a songline. There are other paths to follow. Everything is about you. Now, listen. Cheers. So, most of the day job, as you know, involves talking about poetry. And I hope you don't mind, I've chosen not to do that tonight, but just rather than talk about poems, I'm going to read a few of the damn things. But I guess a few thoughts are probably in order. Sometimes I am asked if and how being a critic of poetry helps the writing of poetry. And I always say, I don't know. I suspect it helps enormously in certain respects. I assume the critic part of my brain and the poetry part of my brain do meet up at night when I'm asleep and hatch plans and have a gossip. But I try to ensure their congress remains sort of, submerged. For all the wonders of poetry expertise in the Academy, and for all that I do work hard to try and contribute a small part to that, the truth is when it comes to writing a poem, you never really know what you're doing. Not at the, not the workshop stage, but the bit before that when you sit down to a blank page. More specifically, if you do sit down to write a poem and you think you do know what you're doing, it's very, very unlikely that you'll write anything decent. I don't really know why that is, but that's the way it works. So one is always trying to understand and learn and develop ideas, but with poetry, in my experience, some of the oldest cliches just can't be beaten. My two favourite crusty truisms about poetry both come from Northern Ireland, bandied about by my elders back in the day. The first came from John Hewitt, who claimed, if you write poetry, it's your own fault. And the second came from Michael Longley, who said, "If I knew where poems came from, I'd go there." It is a large part of being a poet that sometimes the poems don't come. This evening I'm going to read some new stuff mixed in with some old stuff, but the new stuff is fresh enough that I'm still kind of amazed that it exists at all. The truth is, I had a really stinking run for several years, not that long ago, where trying to write a poem seemed like wading through treacle. At one stage, trying to get things cooking, I booked myself a wee writing trip, as you do, to Northern Ireland, where I had use of a caravan. But when I got there, I felt the rut more keenly than ever. I just couldn't write a line to save myself. I realized I was probably trying too hard and overcomplicating things. So I tried an exercise where I thought I'd just write about something plain and normal and something that was in front of me. I happened to have a punnet of tomatoes out of the fridge. So my eyes fell on that and said, right, that's what we're going to do. We're going to forget everything else and just write a poem about a tomato. 3 long days, 3 long nights, I sat and looked at the tomato and tried to have tomatoey feelings and took notes, and it was really useless and a colossal waste of time. I ended up feeling a complete idiot, stupid poetry and stupid feckin' tomatoes. So I drove up to the ferry to come home, very much thinking the whole writing poetry part of my life was completely finished. But on the boat, I went out to the deck to look miserably out to sea when a very strange looking bloke came up to me and started chatting away. As sometimes happens when you're in transit, the guy basically spilled his life story within 2 minutes. He lived in Belfast but had been raised in Glasgow. His fondest childhood memories were of hanging out with his grandfather in an allotment. His grandfather had died during the pandemic and the guy was on his way over to sort of sort out the allotment, as it were. It so happens that the grandest pride and joy were tomatoes, which he grew every year in a greenhouse. And the bloke started talking, unprompted, at length and with great passion, about tomatoes. He said that since his granddad had died, he couldn't look at a tomato without becoming overwhelmed with something like joy and grief simultaneously. And when we parted ways, after about just a few minutes, he shouted out to me across the deck, "Hey, big man, grab life by the tomatoes." So it was clear to me that I had been visited by the muse in the shape of Billy from Govan. And it was a gift that I'd been offered. And this is a poem called The Tomato. Sorry. The big, juicy tomato grows red, but not quite red as tomato ketchup. Off the vine, is it dead or just beginning to die? It's a big, ripe, juicy tomato anyhow, succulicious and uneven scarlet with olive hints, tinged yellows. Its watery pulp, seeded liquid, swollen in filmy skin. The way it catches light, it looks like light gleams from within. Tomatoes were tastier at yours, where I tagged along through allotment rows to the sun-gilt of your greenhouse windows. Each year, from nothing to squelchous bites of tomatoey wow. Now you're gone. I see a million jars of tomato sauce on shelves, vats of ooze, dismal dinner bowls, mouth slurp stains. Here is plenty with rot in it. A shovel leans against the unlatched door. Drones of green fly in the late sun. I'm back among the greenhouse rows where you once sang to your grow bags. Lass, shall I go with you to the meadows? And here it comes again, that tingle in the tongue for a taste of another salt-tined, sour, vibrant, juice-burst red sunrise. It is fantastic with mayo. Dusk falls on the allotments. Sing for your life. Sing for a tomato. Way before coming over to live here, one of the main images I would have associated with Edinburgh, as I'm sure most people do, were the two, iconic bridges over the Firth. And the newer third bridge still takes a bit of getting used to. A couple of summers ago, just to get out of the city on a nice day, Rosie and I drove to Fife to go out for a spin, get some fish and chips. And en route to Fife, whatever headspace I was in, I was really taken aback by how impressive I felt the new bridge was. I think we can get very blasé about such things far too quickly, and it may not be the biggest bridge in the world, but it is nonetheless enormous. It's a quite awesome feat of engineering and design, and a big, imposing new beast that's now indelibly part of the landscape of this place, so I thought I'd try a poem about it. This is called the Queensferry Bridge. Dwarfed by the construction, I drive towards this big new bridge, its cathedral of gleam, a vast suspended gesture through the air. Even this approach road is so large scale. I feel I'm driving a miniature toy car, half expecting a gigantic child's hand will loom down to grab and raise my Honda up to its beatific laughing megaface in the sky. And each coming glimpse of the bridge brings a lift in expectation of the Firth's expansion and Fife's green coast. For these days in the city have left me feeling like one of those gratuitous extended scenes in the box where some guy punches and punches and punches a face to death. Now I'm finally crossing the bridge. I am high, if not free, above water that looks how I imagine the mind might look if it were visible. A sky-coloured brim swill of wave glint and shadow, all ambivalent surface and unseen depth currents, immense inner convections that could arise if aroused, swallow the coast and crush this bridge. I can't wait to drive by Fife's warehouses and housing schemes with tricycles in the lawn, oven chips in the oven, bay windows looking out to see waves, purple milk vetch, creeping buttercup, common self-heal and oil rigs that straddle dream blue waters. Yet I'm still crossing the bridge as the wind pummels and pummels and pummels. Traffic is fast, yet this feels like a queue. I'm crossing the bridge towards fish and chips and East Neuk, blind curves in the road, eroding shores that leave me feeling like the misted salt spawn of waves as they smash and smash and smash upon rocks, sprayed into raw air. Traffic fuming through this glittering metal, thrust into the Firth that I'm almost across, hoping something might come, some new thought, better feeling. For the mind is the sea. The mind is mountains, rivers, and the great earth moving and suspended until it's not. Okay, I've lost my set list already. Let's see. All right, I'm going to stick with bridges. Let's see. In Belfast, the last bridge over the Lagan, just before its mouth meets Belfast Lough, used to be home to a huge flock of starlings. I don't know if they're still there, but in my memory, they were a regular feature. And you know the way a flock of starlings makes its crazy sort of patterns in the air. It was always mesmerizing to see this huge murmuration weave its wonders. One of the most beautiful things ever, I think. So this poem pictures them at twilight in a kind of red-pink evening sky. Against the backdrop of the grimy city, somewhere about this time of the year where it's getting dark. If you write poems that are miserable enough, they always stay relevant. This is a poem written in 2006 about feeling, upset and anxious about the state of the world. I know it was 2006 because this was, in fact, the first poem I wrote as a citizen of Edinburgh. I remember writing it with a lovely view from the 8th floor of what's now called 40 George Square, where I'd been newly installed, and there was a gorgeous red-pink sort of sky in the evening. But I was feeling overwhelmed by the sense that the broader world around me was going to rack and ruin. From the vantage point of 2024, I hear people talking about that time, the noughties, as if it was some kind of golden age. But this is what happens. But anyhow, I'll read this now for anyone who is feeling upset and anxious about the state of the world at the present moment. If anyone in the audience isn't feeling anxious about the state of the world, I'll ask you to please share your medication amongst the rest of us evenly. But otherwise, we've got the starlings. This is called Lagan Weir. The way things are going, there'll be no quick fix, no turning back. The way that flock of starlings skirls back in itself, then swerves forward, swabbing and scrawling the shell-pink buff sky, while I stand in two minds on this scuffed bridge, leaning over the fudged river that slooshes its dark way to open harbours and the glistering sea. Like flak from fire, a blizzard of evacuees, that hula-hooping sky swarm of starlings swoops and loops the dog-rose sky, while any way I look, the writing's on the wall. I watch the hurly-burlied, humdrum traffic belch to a stop, fugging, clacking, charring the clotted air, making it clear things are going to get a whole lot worse before they get better. That flickered, fluttered, hurry-scurry of starlings sweeps left, then swishes right through the violet sky, while I huddle and huff, with a dove in one ear saying, look the other way, a hawk in the other, braying self-righteous fury. It's hard not to turn back to a time when one looked at you and I knew things were going to get a whole lot better before they'd get worse. That hue and cry, those hurricanes of starlings, swoosh and swirl their fractals over towers, hotels, hospitals, flyovers, catamarans, city dwellers, passers through, who might as well take a leap and try following after that scatterwheeling circus of shadows as slowly turn and make their dark way homeward, never slowing, not knowing the way things are going. These early poems really do feel like they're written by somebody else entirely, I'll have to say. It's a weird feeling. I've got vague memories of the person who wrote them. I've also a sense you wouldn't want to know that guy too well. I do remember taking very seriously the idea about writing about the ills of the time, about Northern Ireland, the troubles and all of that. But also, really didn't want to be sort of defined or dominated by that. So I thought, well, what else have I got experience of? So I also wrote lots of poems about being an arsehole. This is a poem called Don't You. I was working as a waitress in a cocktail bar. That much is true. But even then, I knew I'd find myself behind the wheel of a large automobile or in a beautiful house, asking myself, well, if sweet dreams are made of these, why don't I travel the world in the 7 seas to Rio and dance there in the sand? Just like a river twisting through the dusty land. For though you thought you were my number one, this girl did not want to have a gun for hire. No bright spark, who was just dancing in the dark. You were working as a waitress in a cocktail bar when I met you, and I believed in miracles. Every step you took, I was watching you. I asked for your name, tipped you again and again, and you said, don't you want me? To fetch you a drink that would turn your pink mouth blue. Don't you think this 10th tiny chaser is 10 times bigger than you? Don't you talk about places and people you will never know? Don't you symbolize femininity by use of the letter O? And I said, don't you want me, baby? Don't you want me? All right, I'm gonna spring one on my mum here. My mum was the youngest of a great quantity of siblings. So I grew up with lots and lots of aunties. The way that works, many of her siblings were considerably older than herself, and they in turn had lots of children. So when I was small, my mum had loads of nieces, but because they were so much older than me, I called them, my aunties rather than my cousins. So I really did have a huge surplus of seemingly uncountable aunties. Most of them lived in the country, many in farms. My mum and dad are from County Tyrone. I confess, when I was small, I didn't really like traveling to visit the country relatives. It took you away from, your mates and from the TV and football and all of that stuff. You had to sit and listen to dreary old people talk. But anyway, all things pass. Thankfully, some of my aunties are still with us, but others have moved on. And that world of farmhouse kitchens and so forth is sadly gone. So this is a wee poem called The Aunties. Cured haddock infested the kitchen, where I'd sit at the edge of my aunts with their thistle hair, wheaten bread and breath of Benson and Hedges, listening to atrocities on a shortwave radio. Stroke, bomb, gun, cancer, all were the same to them, with their litanies of the dead, dying, and those struggling to care, for all still needing to be cared for. Sure, you'll sour the milk with that face, one aunt teased me, and the rest yacked and cackled as the sun crashed through. Cutlery sparkled, and the room flashed daffodil, butter gold, egg yolk brilliant. Then one by one, my aunties left. All right, in my experience, it's quite difficult to write poems about Edinburgh. The place is already so saturated in its own image and sort of dripping with heritage industry and all the rest of it. But I've given it a go over time, and I'll try a few of these out for you now. I think most people here are citizens of the town, but if anybody is just visiting and hasn't yet seen this, one of the remarkable things about Edinburgh is its fog that sometimes envelops the place. It really is something. I remember even before living here, I was aware that there's some kind of unreal aspect to this. I was over from Belfast for a gig one night. I was walking back to my hotel in the early hours. As thick mist sort of came down with this immense speed. I was walking through the meadows. There was nobody else around. And it really, really just looked like a kitsch effect from a Hammer horror film. It was like, I thought I'd walked onto the set of a Meatloaf video or something. But the best thing was the next morning, I met up with some locals. I said, what about that fog? Because I'd really never seen a fog like this before. And they said, somewhat indignantly, what fog? There's no fog. That was a horror. And the relish and pride in the local term was something I really empathized with. And horror really is a better word than mist. So this is a poem called Horror. See how you feel? Once I saw nothing but weak piss light on a tattoo of blue-grey and grey-blue bleak stone, black stone, bleached sandstone. I saw buildings of flue-grey granite loom over paving flags of bilge beneath a sky of cold porridge. The city looked encrypted. Tall buildings were rows of crypts raised high on blunt force. Pitch your head against the surface of Edinburgh and your skull will split. I saw a demented gull's slice of meat feast pizza fall from the air onto a cardboard mattress and stained clump of sleeping bag outside a letting agency on Clark Street. I saw an upcomer posting updates from his run through Holyrood Park with smart filtered panoramic shots of the city captioned #This place is great. I saw a local in puff jacket with paper mache skin knocking her head off a pharmacy door, muttering, fuck this, fuck you, fuck off. Then things turned grim. Streets gloomed the way the mind can cloud and memories vanish as the air thickened to virtual mushroom. A thick horror began to doom scroll over the pelt of Arthur's seat, to swallow Parliament, dynamic earth, Southside, Morden, in flumes of virus-grey shadow. Some retro-Gothic filmmaker would have paid $1 million to catch its spectral fingers groping through the meadows. I saw a child pointing, look at this, as the fog rubbed against her flat window, while an elderly couple at the window below were deleted by the uncoiling mist. I could hear unseen buses drive as if ferry boats chugging in a cosmic ladle of unspeakable soup. Faint lanterns through a fog that seemed unalive. It felt like hard things were feather blown through a nimbo stratus of dream. Banks, firms, startups, statues, blipped in a continuous ether. I saw each building was a vessel, adrift in an ocean of haze. Edinburgh, a ghost fleet of container ships, carriers of counted souls. I could see nothing is out there to separate us from the infinite void of space, not bricks, steel, concrete, but atmosphere. I could see that each room, each layer, is a nest of fragile bones, breaths, skin types, needs, body reeks, regrets, cells at the mercy of the air. I could see how truly we share our element with the dead in limbo, how this total cloud blinds all here in a womb of haze rain, the walls like pulsing membranes, where I try to find my way home through the reek and fire in these stones. stick with Edinburgh. Again, for anyone visiting who just arrived in September, you'll be looking forward to sticking around for the festival season in August, I'm sure. It's obviously a big selling point of the city. Personally, I stay completely away. I can't handle crowds, people. So this is an old curmudgeon poem. It focuses on what I take to be a universal truth of the Edinburgh Festival, year by year, at least in my own mind. On the opening day of the festival, it starts to rain, and it inevitably chucks down for weeks, constantly, until it's all over, and then the sun comes out again. This poem features a cameo appearance from Vincent over here, but when he was 8 years old. It ends with a quotation. I imagine most of you have recognized the quotation. It's on the LP and the film of the Woodstock Festival from the late 60s. The Saturday night, a big sort of rainstorm came in and nearly wrecked the whole thing. And it's a guy from the tannoy shouted out what's now the quotation in this poem. I think it's one of the great sound bites of the hippie dream. So if I can find it, this is a poem called August in Edinburgh. Not a cloud in the sky, and it's raining. It's the brusqueness of things and the drag of things that hurts. The most beautiful woman in the world is in Edinburgh at the festival. She looks me in the eye and says, please move. I'm trying to look at the artworks. My doctor says the heart works, but don't push it. I hear music, long familiar songs everywhere I go. Pain is in the mind, someone tells Leonardo DiCaprio in Shutter Island. Everyone is rushing, but the crowd moves slow. Leonardo can't get his head around it. A man in costume shouts, we've sold out here, holding his hat out for money and rain. The mind is an island, and everyone is beautiful, looking for something new again. But nothing connects, and it's cold. My son sticks my phone charger in his ear and says, I've got an electric brain. I've been streaming old LPs I never thought I'd hear again, never thinking the old songs would not work, trying not to work the brain, trying not to rise to the bait when that long, familiar voice rises from the damp and dismal crowd once again to say, hey, if we all think hard enough, maybe we can stop this rain. Thank you very much. Are we okay? Yeah? Yeah. Just 32 more poems to go. So the decorations are up in the shops and malls. They tell us Christmas is coming, so get your credit cards out. This is a poem about an unfortunate moment I had going Christmas shopping with a tremendous hangover one morning. I basically had this sort of outer body thing. I was in a shop and saw a beautiful famous actress, all in gold, come through the crowd towards me as if to embrace. And I thought, oh yeah, I went to hold my hands out and realized it was a video advert for perfume on a flat screen on a wall. So this is a poem very much about not being one of the three wise men. This is called The Magus. Lead me, skulking, through the polyvinyl whiff and fooster of high street shops, the tepid white wine swill of another morning sky, until the fugazi colours, perturbing sheen of one store's video advert on an HD screen opens some inner door within my hangover's Armageddon, and I enter a green meadow with Charlize Theron. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, corrupt, weary, and sore, I still seek gold, frankincense, myrrh, Dior. Okay, nearly finished. Two more. Just before I finish, I'll try something a little bit different. Back in the day, going back 30 years of being a student in Dublin, when I realized, decided I'm going to try this poetry thing for real, I established a whole load of rules. And it's interesting over time how I've broken every single one of them, but I think this was the last one to be broken. And the rule was, don't write tourist poems or poems about, foreign travels. Of course, I very much hoped I'd get to travel and see lots of places, but there was something about the, I've been to Paris and now I'm writing a poem about a vibe that just seemed impossibly bourgeois. So I said, nah. But last year I was lucky enough to spend some time in Japan. In particular, I got to chill out for a week in Kyoto. And at the end of the day, what's the point of being, a poet and spending a week in Kyoto if you don't go write a poem about it? So here we are. I stayed in a lovely hotel by a river. And when coming and going, there was a bird that was always standing in the river just outside the hotel. So this became a nice little sort of homely thing when you're going out and coming back. I thought it was a crane, but through Googling and photographs, I established later that it was a heron. So each day I'd say hi to the heron and felt we had a little bit of a connection. But as time wore on, the heron started to freak me out a bit because it really just stood there in the blazing heat of the day, in the same place in the river, day in, day out, doing absolutely nothing. I was eventually a little bit like, come on, do something, get a hobby, let's go. So my little sense of connection became a bit ruffled, as it were. This poem has another quotation in it. This one's from a German filmmaker, Werner Herzog. A documentary called Grizzly Man. It's a documentary about a guy making a documentary about grizzlies. He thought he had a special connection with them until one of them ate him. This poem is called The Kamo River in Kyoto. Along the Kamogawa, between Sanjo Bridge and Shizo Bridge, a heron stands in the stream's million pieces of mirror glinting movement, a stock-still heron. Under the motionless sun that could bake an egg, listening to the plash of river trickle, standing in the surface shimmer like an inscrutable data center surrounded by a million solar panels. The heron is still. I remember Herzog's words, I discover no kinship, no understanding, no mercy. I can see only the overwhelming indifference of nature. Yet it stands, a heron among reed waver, potpourri shadows under Yoshino cherry trees. A light breeze flutters. Traffic in Kawabata, signal noise from Kiamachi. The world is changing. In the onflow and flux of eddy swirls, standing motionless, a heron between Shizo Bridge and Sanjo Bridge along the Kamogawa. So, good news is this is the last poem. Bad news is it's a bit of a mouthful. We'll get through it. Thank you very much for coming out and listening. It's hugely appreciated. I hope it's been all right. We've got family, friends, colleagues, students, past, present, in the crowd, which is freaking me out a bit, I'll have to say. But I want to say thank you very much to all of you. It's been an honor and a privilege. I know I'm not always a walk in the park, but thanks for putting up with me. Hopefully there's lots of good times and more poems ahead. But this has been a nice little sort of a mark along the way. When I saw I was coming up here for a job, one of the things I was really keen on was the way in which the Meadows is basically part of the campus. And this does remain a delight. More and more, probably with stupendous repetition and predictability, I tend to be writing poems about going to the common green. One way or another. So I'm going to finish a poem about going for a walk in the park to the Meadows, just out the door from here. So thank you to Alex, to the school, and again, thank you all very much for coming. I've got a dry mouth. This is a poem called Walking Out One Morning After Lockdown Has Been Lifted. Darkness everywhere. Night pervades, then dies. Now curb sweepers, bread vans, and early traffic rumble by my windowside bed while rain music fizzles in slate roofs as dawn pours inside. An alarm squawks that I must not lie in my listening to telegraph pole birds getting high over elms and rowans, lifting into citrus burst skies like memories of songs. But rise and walk this city with multi-million windows for eyes. Versions of the world and time are limned through screens, overpinging with messages. Data flutters through, whatever dimension it is, data flutters through, the space within space. As I open my door like a book and walk past steam wands, stretching hot foamed milk in cafes, unshuttering shops, skinny malink cats curled under fence posts, the lamppost travelogues of scent, casting spells over all sniffing dogs. Nothing feels real if it's not in the net, yet nothing on the net feels real. Now I brim with yesteryears, feeling virtual on this thoroughfare, walking into carbon debt, an exhaust broom on compact streets, dwarfed on each side by tall grey buildings, so the traffic's like a 2-lane wide ant trail up the deep crack of a rhino's backhide. And onto grass I go, over the sluice sounds of drain flow, underground culverts, into the city's meadows. One thing is for sure, he said, then he died. Then another, and another. Such vast scale, my mind miniature. I dreamt I was asked by a smart machine why it shouldn't pull the plug on human things, and all my consciousness could muster was spaghettied emotional mess. Now ping-pong between position and sense, onto grass I go, as if the best way of honouring the dead is to make the most of living. A teen gobs a humongous bruised yellow yinger onto a tree-lined path, and onto grass I go, to sync with the time zone of Earth's slow verbs, dreaming names, faint signals, green whispers, winged singers and sycamores, willows, hornbeams, free park benches where a red-headed businesswoman in an ink blue suit eats a meal-deal Wiltshire ham sandwich under clearing heavens while sad shadows blend with the cherry tree's ginger-tinged sunglow. Onto grass I go, and I've made it to the meadows. You'll know, of course, I write this at my desk in the night, these words already processed by machine. As a cyclist in Look at Me Lycra torpedoes past a duffel-coated toddler who's learning new words, links with the living and dead, holding in titchy hands a dandelion whose wind-drifted seeds land their trance-like parachutes on bittercress and wild carrot, while a frisbee glides past like a complex experiment on motion and grace. Through the tree-leaf railed air come soft pock tennis sounds, and I can't grasp this slide between phantom and rail, but want to ask, hey there, smart machine, how do you feel? Hey trees, what are you laughing at? Two students in beanie hats with tote bags of books sip from reusable refilled hot polypropylene cups, sunlight on their faces, and yes, I'm in this, whatever it is, this blue lift, this light page, this world plunge, this... Thank you very much for listening. Cheers. Thank you.